Security isn't a product. It's a feeling. Confidence. Safety. Peace of mind. A feeling of trust. If you had that confidence, what would you do? What would you create? What could you achieve? How could you change the world? Imagine the possibilities. At Duo, security is our business. But we're more than a security company. We're a trusted access company. Duo helps you protect what's important. Verifying the identity of your users, assessing the health of their devices, bringing trusted access to your applications. You have a mission. Security shouldn't stand in your way. Put your passion into your work and trust Duo to secure it, because our mission is to protect your mission.
Bonjour, guten tag, and hello. My name is Jim Simpson, and I lead product management here at Duo Security. Thank you so much for joining me today when we're going to talk a little bit about some research and beyond. Quick housekeeping note for those of you who are joining us live on the stream here. If you have any questions about any of the content as we're going through it, please feel free to ask in the comment section. We'll have people standing by to answer those questions. A little bit about the agenda that we're going over today. We'll talk a little bit about why we're here, Duo's roadmap. We'll look into Duo's research and beyond. We'll talk a little bit about Duo Access, and we'll talk a little bit about Duo's MFA edition. So let me jump into things. Why are we here? Why does Duo do the things that it does? If you are working in IT or security, you're probably aware that you've got a number of different things that you have to manage to make sure that your security hygiene is in a certain state. You've got your users, you've got devices, the network, applications, and oftentimes a lot of the solutions that go into that are disjoint, and you have to put a whole bunch of different things together in order to make it all work in a good way. And here at Duo, our sense is that complexity can actually work against really good security. So the way that we like to think about this is, say if you wanted to protect your feet when you're walking around, you could do it a couple of different ways. Maybe you would coat the entire world in leather. That's one way of doing it. Or maybe you get a pair of sensible shoes. And Duo likes to think of itself, we like to think of ourselves as those sensible pair of shoes. And the way that we look at that is something that we call trusted access, where you're really dropping all of the silos between these different things that you have to be concerned about in a world where people are starting to use their own devices in work contexts, and people and organizations are starting to use cloud applications. And we call this trusted access, and really what it's about is making sure that your users are who they claim to be, and the health of their devices are up to date when they go to access the applications that you provision for their work use. So that's why we're here. I want to talk a little bit about the roadmap. If you've been with Duo for a while, you may not know of all the different things that we've been working on lately. So before I jump into that, I want to talk a little bit about the different product lines that we have. We're known for really good two-factor authentication, and many of you might have joined us using Duo's free edition or Duo's MFA edition. Duo MFA is the world's best and easiest two-factor authentication, and it also provides you insight into the devices that your end users are using to interact with your applications. We've also got Duo Access, which on top of providing that insight and really great multi-factor authentication, It provides you the ability to set policy around those devices, users, and applications. And it also has a really great, easy-to-use phishing tool so that you can gain insight into how your user behavior is when they're confronted with these kinds of breaches or potential for compromise. And last but not least, it also includes a form of secure single sign-on to help you as you're moving into your cloud infrastructure. And then most recently, we launched a product called Duo Beyond, which takes all of this and goes beyond and gives you the ability to distinguish between managed end user devices and unmanaged user devices, the ability to control which things can speak with which applications, and it can give you control over who has access to internal applications while they're outside of the network. So, with all of that in mind, I want to talk about the roadmap a little bit. So on the top here, we've got Beyond, and down here, we've got our MFA and Access editions. So at the end of 2016, for MFA and Access, we released functionality around Azure AD Sync. So if you're considering moving into start using Azure AD, you can now onboard your users from Azure AD. And we're working on some functionality that will allow you to migrate from Active Directory to Azure AD, because that tends to be one of the big hiccups, is how do you start using some of these new technologies in the Microsoft world? And so we'll actually help you migrate to this new technology. For those of you who are using Active Directory, one of the things that we've heard time and again is that you actually want to control which attributes you're pulling in from Active Directory, and so you can do that now as well. And then finally, of course, we're always adding new SAML applications into support for Duo Access Edition, and so we've got another 10 of those as of the end of last year. Now, in the first quarter of 2016, which just ended, we launched a new product called Duo Beyond, and in that product, there are two major pieces of functionality. One is around trusted endpoints, which will allow you to distinguish between managed and unmanaged devices, and we'll go into detail on that in a little bit. And another bit of functionality called the Duo Network Gateway, which allows you to provide application-level access to internal applications to any user who's outside of your network. For Duo MFA and Access Edition, we released a version of our Access Gateway that uses Docker so that it's much easier to get up and running with a Duo Access Gateway. There's also a Splunk module now, so if you're using Splunk as a SIM, you just snap this module in and it'll start pulling data from your Duo instance and give you graphs about usage, authentication, and all sorts of other information. And if you have any feedback on that, of course, this is our first version of a Splunk module. We would love to hear what other things you'd like to see. And then, of course, if you use Windows, you might be familiar with our Windows Logon integration. And we just released an update which brings the end user experience in line with the end user experience for web applications. And so your end users can now choose between the different methods that they want to use, and it's a much friendlier interface for them. This quarter, we're working on a number of different things. So as part of Duo Beyond, we're working on managed mobile devices. So when we launched, you could distinguish between managed and unmanaged for laptops and desktops. Now we're going to be bringing that same functionality to the mobile devices. And we also will be integrating with other enterprise application management systems as well. And then for the MFA and Access editions, we're going to have new dashboards and reporting based on a lot of customer feedback that we've heard over the last couple of years. We'll also support multiple usernames. So if you have multiple identity providers and those overlap for a single user, no longer will you have multiple users. You'll be able to map them to the same user. And then, of course, we're now going to launch, much like we protect Windows Logon GUI, we're now going to have you're now going to have the ability to protect any kind of Mac authentication using two-factor authentication. And then towards the end of this year, we're looking at supporting more functionality in the Duo Network Gateway for Duo Beyond, and there'll be other mobile device management integrations for the mobile devices. And then for MFA and Access Edition, you'll be able to set policy via our API. We're going to support more grouping of administrative function within the admin panel. And then prior to the next iPhone launch, we're going to have the ability for you to do mobile backup and restore of your accounts in Duo Mobile. So that's the roadmap. I also want to take the opportunity here to introduce a colleague of mine, Trevor Huff, from Product Management, who's going to talk a little bit about Beyond and some research. Trevor?
Thanks, Jim. and a pleasure to say good afternoon to everyone across the pond.
I think it's still early over there, but
Good morning then.
well, no. In parts of Europe, it's afternoon. You guys have many time zones too, right? So.
Excellent. Well, it's quite early here. So let's first take the opportunity to talk about some research that we've done because we collect a lot of information here at Duo. So one of the most interesting things, and we talked about this a little bit before, is the difference between what we're seeing of Mac and Windows. So one of the most striking things that we saw was that our Windows users are keeping their both browsers and operating systems more up to date than our fellow Mac users. And I'm a Mac user myself, but we're seeing quite a difference here. And we attribute this to being one of a couple things. So we should note that first off, we consider the latest and greatest, as an example, Windows 10 and the latest train of Mac to be the most up-to-date thing based off of what we see here at Duo.
So like Windows 10 and Mac OS, whatever, 10 dot whatever, like every time it comes out.
That's exactly correct.
That's the most recent version. That's what we consider to be the most recent version.
Precisely. And so as an example, that's probably why we see Mac OS being the laggard in this context, because Mac is constantly releasing new updates as opposed to Windows, who has the Windows 10 train. But the more interesting thing here is that we're seeing constant adoption of Windows 10 across the board, which is an interesting bit of information. On the up-to-date browser side, it is very interesting to us that our Windows users are keeping their browsers more up to date than our fellow Mac users, which was an interesting data point.
Why do you think that is? Is it because it's like embedded in the operating system versus not, or?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, Jim. So based off of what we see, not a lot of people use Edge, which would be embedded in the operating system, and we do see a relatively equal split between Internet Explorer and Chrome. On the Internet Explorer side, obviously that's embedded in the operating system, and Chrome has, for the most part, those active updates. We also help users with Duo Access and Duo Beyond keep their operating systems and browsers up to date. We can do sort of a gentle nudge and guidance, letting those users know that, hey, this is out of date, or we can do a more, I'll say, enforced guidance where we can actually block users if their plugins, browsers, or operating systems are out of date, and we can tell them, hey, before you can actually access this particular application, you need to actually update your any of those plugins, browsers, or operating systems.
Yeah, so the way that this works is in Duo Access Edition, because we have insight into the different versions of operating systems and browsers, you can set policy that then allows you to make a decision like, well, do I want my end users to remediate this situation, and we'll walk them through that, or do I just want to block them after a certain amount of time? And this can really work to your advantage, say if there's some sort of vulnerability that comes out with like a mobile operating system or a laptop operating system where there's a 0 day, and what are you going to do? Well, you can actually go into Duo Access and say, you know what, my end users can't get access to their applications until they update to the most recent operating system that fixes this. And then you have the opportunity to walk your users right through a self-remediation process to get them up to date and up and running with the latest and safest operating system.
The other thing that I really like that you just noted, Jim, is that you just said the latest version. So we've tried to abstract away version numbers or any of the complexities that revolve around that. So we actually don't use the notion of version numbers for the most part in the product. And so from an admin perspective and also from an end user perspective. So we've really tried to make it easy both from an administrator and end user side, where our admins can actually just say, hey, keep my end users up to date. And our end users can say, hey, look, I see that this is a couple days out of date. I actually have no idea what a version number even is. So I just understand that I need to keep my thing up to date.
Right.
So let's move on and talk about Duo Beyond Edition.
Right.
So Duo Beyond is our first productized version of Google's Beyond Corp, which is where we can conceptually think of this as providing user and device access to a particular application, and we can be as granular or as broad as we want. So we can say, Trevor, the end user, is on this particular laptop, and he should only have access to this group of applications. Whereas Jim, the end user, he needs a much broader level of access, but only for one particular laptop. If he goes home and tries to access that same group of applications from his home laptop, he should not have access to any of those applications. Maybe he only needs access to his mail. We can provide that level of granularity, and we actually don't care if he's accessing cloud-based applications or if he's accessing on-prem web-based applications, because we have the ability to cloudify those on-prem applications.
So tell me let's look at some of the details there.
Excellent. So let's first start off with a traditional network-based security model. And we can conceptually think of this as, our remote users are accessing some sort of choke point. So let's think of this as a VPN, and they come in, and at this point they have access to the complete network. They can come in and they can see everything. So this is application 1 all the way through application 6 in what we have here. And so this could be thought of as the domain controller to a NAS, all the way through any other web-based application or additional web-based applications that they may need access to or not need access to. So in this case, a remote user may only need access to one application, and yet by accessing this network-based security model, they've just been granted access to everything on the network.
And if I can jump in really quick here, so the potential risk for that is, say you have a contractor that you're working with and you give them access to your entire network. They might not be a malicious actor in any way, shape, or form, but if their credentials were compromised and an attacker were able to use those credentials to then get into the network, they might actually do something with that additional access to all of the other applications that this contractor had access to just by virtue of being able to get into the VPN.
That's a really great point. So now let's take a look at what we consider to be application-based security, or what we've implemented with the Duo Network Gateway. So Jim, let's take you in this example. You only need access to application 3, 4, and 5, and we could think of this as Jira, Confluence, and let's say SharePoint.
Okay.
You don't actually need access to application 1, 2, and 6, and you could think of this conceptually as any other application in your environment. So you are going to come in, and let's say for application 3, let's pretend this is Jira. Mm-hmm. You need access to this from any machine. So this could be your work machine. Mm-hmm. This could be your home machine. You're going to need it on the road when you're out at a hotel traveling. That's great. We're going to let you in. And we have the ability to create granular policies based around this. But application 4 and 5, so that's Confluence and SharePoint, we're going to create a little bit of a different policy for you around that. So you can only access this when you're in the United Kingdom. You can only access these if your operating system is up to date, if your browsers and plugin are up to date. And so, but you never need access to applications 1, 2, and 6. So you don't get those. You're only going to have access to applications 3, 4, and 5. Does that make sense, Jim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. So the next thing that's part of Duo Beyond Edition is something that we call trusted endpoints, where we're able to distinguish the difference between a corporate-owned or managed machine and a bring your own device or unmanaged machine. So the user, when they are on these devices, we are able to understand and look at and interrogate and identify the difference between these types of devices. So Jim, as I just noted, you might have your managed machine when you're out on the road. And for application 3 here, that's Jira. We don't actually care.
Quick question here.
Yeah, please.
So a managed machine, we talk about managed and unmanaged. A managed machine, what's the idea? Why is a managed machine better?
That's a really great question, Jim. So if we conceptually think about what a managed device traditionally is to an admin, it's something that they control. They've usually put some sort of software on it that they can identify, or that it's connected to Active Directory. So it's something that they know and they trust. They've already gone through the process of attesting that I own this device, it's something that I can identify, and the identification software ranges based on what the company uses. So traditionally in the Mac OS world, it's Jamf, it's Chef, it's Monkey, it's something that they've already attested, they keep it up to date, and it usually has a phone home type of system that if on an emergent occurrence, they can push a software update if needed.
I see.
On the Windows side, we hear a lot of Landesk, Altiris, Tanium. It's those types of softwares where it's again something that they trust. They've already gone through that attestation process. They have a device inventory. They can trust those softwares to keep the devices up to date. And what we're doing is we're identifying those. We're saying, hey, look, you already have this canonical source. Let's use that to make sure that those devices are the only devices that can get into certain applications.
Great.
But you might have other applications, as we've just noted, application 3 for you, Jim, that's Jira. We're going to let any device connect to that. But for application 4 and 5, that's Confluence and SharePoint in our example here, we only want managed devices to come into that. And we have the granularity to make sure that happens. So let's actually take a look and see how that works.
Sure. Cool.
So I have a demo here, and here's what our interface looks like if you haven't seen it. This is the dashboard that an administrator would traditionally look at. And we have something called Device Insight, where you're able to see a high-level overview of what your devices are doing in your environment. So with the recent update of Duo Beyond, we've added a couple new things where we have the difference between the types of devices, laptops and desktops versus mobile devices, and this new graph of trusted endpoints, where you can see a quick overview of how many of them are trusted in your environment, how many of them are not, and how many of them are unknown. And unknown just basically means we haven't seen them yet, so we can't make an inference of if they're trusted or not. But I think the most interesting thing is how quickly we're able to actually deploy this. So,
oh yeah, so this trusted endpoint stuff, like typically if I wanted to do this, like what does that look like, you know, before Duo Beyond came onto the market?
So traditionally what we see with customers is it takes on average 6 to 12 months. They usually do something with PKI, 802.1x. It runs the gamut, but on average after talking with customers, it usually took them around 6 to 12 months. We can get them stood up and running with Duo Beyond. We own the entire infrastructure for them, on average around an hour.
Okay.
So let me show you actually how that works, because it's actually that easy. So we have this lovely little thing that says Trusted Endpoints Configuration. We just click that, and we go to the right here that says Add Integration. Now, this is the first time you're actually checking out Duo Beyond. You'll actually have a nice little overview of how it works prior to getting to this screen. But since I'm already familiar with it and I've gone through the process, I can just go directly into adding an integration. We have a couple management tools here. So we have Active Directory, Jamf, and Landesk that work right out of the box. We also have generic integrations if you don't have any of those in your environment. So if you don't use Jamf or if you don't use Landesk, we also support any other tool in your environment on the Mac OS side and also on the Windows side. So as I noted, Altiris, Tanium, any of that stuff.
How does that work? Is there like a common way that all of these things like work together that we've been leveraging, or like how can we go like from these specific ones to the generic ones?
So,
curious.
Yeah, no problem. So the way that those work specifically is we're pushing an executable on the Windows side, and we're also pushing a Python script on the Mac side.
Okay.
So it's a very easy and simple way, and I'll go into each one of these and show how those work. So why don't we start with the Mac, because that's actually we find that most of our admins are very familiar with Mac. And I'll actually start with the manual enrollment, just because most of our admins don't want to go through the process of pushing something initially. They actually want to test it first on their local machine. So if we just select this particular integration, and we have a Mac OS manual enrollment process, we click that. If you download the enrollment script, you run the script, and you hit any of your integrations that present the Duo prompt, you can immediately see that endpoint is flagged as trusted. Each time you run the script, it does something to flag each individual machine differently. So it's not that each machine is running the same process or running the same script. Each machine is flagged differently. And so we identify each machine differently, and we can actually make sure that the way that the certificate is actually landed on each machine is different, and we can identify if people are trying to do anything malicious around that. So if they're trying to copy it or manipulate it in any way, we're able to, on our side, do all of the hard, heavy lifting, so you don't actually have to do anything on the customer side.
Great.
So with the other integrations, Jim, as you noted before, I'm just going to remove this integration really quickly. We have the ability to support many different things. So on the Mac side, since we just noted how popular those are, again, it's as simple as downloading this Python script and uploading it to your favorite tool, such as Jamf, Chef, Monkey, that sort of stuff. If you don't use any of those and you prefer the Windows side of the house, we can also support those. So I'm going to add another integration. I'm going to select this Windows Enterprise Asset Management tool. And there's a little bit more to do here because Windows provides a couple different things that we can leverage. If your machines are domain joined, you just download the executable, you download a batch file, and most of our enterprise asset management tools that we've seen on the Windows side accept those. You run those, push those out through the tool, and it's done. If the machines are not domain joined, there's one additional thing that you need to do to support Google Chrome, and we provide, excuse me, the way to do that just through this local group policy object utility. It's a pretty trivial thing to do, and that's it. Your machines are now identified as managed or unmanaged. The last thing that I'll go through is the Active Directory integration. So if I click Add Integration and select Active Directory, the one additional step that is required here, and I should note, Jim, with our enterprise asset management tool integrations, both on the Mac OS and the Windows side, there's absolutely no hardware that you have to deploy. So it's just a matter of uploading that script into your existing deployments, and you're done. On average, we're seeing our admins take around 15 minutes to an hour, depending on how familiar they are with their internal tools. On the Active Directory side of the house, we do require a proxy to be deployed internally. So that's a Windows 2012 R2 server, and that communicates up with our cloud-based service. And then that's it. You deploy something through a group policy object, and you're off to the races and running. On average, based on the fact that you do have to deploy this Windows 2012 R2 box, install that software, get a group policy object up and running, that takes somewhere around 2 to 3 hours to get deployed. But it's quite a bit less time as opposed to the 6 to 12 months that we see our customers usually taking to get up and running.
Cool.
Any questions here, Jim?
No, I think this is great.
Awesome. So the last place that we see all of this information manifesting itself, of course, is in our Endpoints tab, where you can see if the endpoint itself is trusted or not. Finally, it's in our Reports tab, where you can see all of the information as to why access may have been prevented, or actually granted, where you can see, as an example, no Duo certificate was presented, or if access was in fact approved, you can see that the endpoint was trusted. We also allow this information to be presented in our API. And the last place that I'll actually talk about is how can you use all of this information,
right,
which is in our policy. So we made the policy as simple as possible. It's actually binary. You either can gain access if you have a trusted endpoint, or you're denied access if you don't have a trusted endpoint. But all of this can be leveraged in the grand scope of how our policies work. So this can be done on a global basis. So right here you can see trusted endpoints, allow all endpoints, or block endpoints that do not have a Duo certificate. So this can be done globally. This can be done on an application basis, group basis, or all the way down to an individual user. So we can go as broad or as narrow as we need to.
Great.
Excellent. So now let's flip over to the Duo Network Gateway. So I have here the Duo Network Gateway setup. It's very simple, and we can think of this as cloudifying our internal applications. So if you have, Jira, Confluence, SharePoint, anything along those lines, we're able to make those accessible via the internet to our external folks. So if you're on the road, you're at the hotel, you want to access that application via the internet, and traditionally you may have had to do something else, but we can make this accessible without having to do anything except for going through a Duo prompt. So the way we would do this is I'm going to go here to our Duo Network Gateway admin side. I see here that I have Jira already set up. So I'm going to go through just the quick setup process here. I have to add an integration key. I go through a couple other things in terms of setting up what my external URL is and also what my internal URL is. If your users are already accustomed to a URL that they traditionally hit internally or externally, no problem. We can use that. If you want to first go through some testing in terms of, as an example, split DNS, where you as the admin are going to try something out first, we can accommodate that as well. So we are able to support you however you want. So as an example, you can try something first externally before your users, before you basically turn this over to your end users. After that, you upload a couple certificates to us so we can ensure that the connection is secure. And this, again, is just for web-based applications. After that, you save it, and we can then present it in our secure SSO portal. And Jim's going to talk a little bit more about that. But the key takeaway here is that internal applications are now cloudified from anywhere in the world. Any questions here, Jim?
This is great.
Awesome. So that's all I have. I'm going to hit present here back on the presentation.
Great.
And there was our Duo Beyond demo. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Let's change places.
You know what? I'm going to just do so that your external users and internal users can access it, because it looks like something, I don't know why that, there we are.
Okay, great. Everyone can see this again? Awesome. So Duo Access, let's talk a little bit about Duo Access. So we did a deep dive there technically with Trevor. Thank you very much for that. I always start off with the roadmap and say more is coming later. We definitely have more to talk about. So Duo Access, if you're familiar with Duo's product line as far as MFA goes, Duo Access takes us to the next level where once you start seeing the devices that are on your network, you can then start to build policy around those devices. So I'm going to hop over and show you a couple of these different things here. So Device Insight, you can start to set policy on it. There's secure single sign-on. And there's also now a phishing tool. If you have Duo Access and you haven't checked out some of the new functionality, I'll show you that as well. So let's go over here. Okay. So Device Insight. We started off with this at the very top of the demo with Trevor, and what's really cool about Device Insight is that it'll give you the ability to see the different kinds of devices which are on your network, whether or not they're laptops or desktops. You know, it gives you a breakdown of the different operating systems. You can look at this over different time scales. You can break it down by, what those different operating systems are. And what you're noticing is as I'm working through these different tabs here is the data on the right hand side will dynamically update, and there's also some call outs here that allow you to actually take some action on those things. And so in general, I'm going to take a look at web browsers here because they are updated pretty frequently, and you'll notice that this trending line over 30 days, you see this bump up and then things start to ramp down. This is actually Duo's policy at work here, where end users, they'll get a new operating system or a new browser in place, and then all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of out-of-date browsers on the network. And then what ends up happening is as they start to update their browsers, this trends off, and this is a really, really good thing. And the way that that works is policy. So what I'm going to do here is actually go up to the very top and say, well, let's edit my policy based on this. And this will take us to the global policy section here. And in particular, I'm going to use maybe not Mac OS X. We'll pick on the web browsers here. So I'm going to go to browsers. And, there's a number of different things here where we can say, we want to warn users if their browser is out of date and potentially block them if it's more than 6 months out of date. You could actually make this 0 days if there's some sort of real vulnerability associated with the browser. Of course, you have the option to select which of these things you want to update and how often you want to update them. And then the other great thing about this, like Trevor mentioned previously, is you can do this on a global scale, you can do this on a per application basis, you can do it on a group of users, or any combination of those things. So whatever works for your network is likely to be able to be handled by this policy engine here. And it's all automatic, which is really, really great. So this is the overall idea of Device Insight and then being able to set different policies around those. And there are a number of different things that you can do with this, everything from where the user is coming from to the different kinds of plugins that they've got, whether or not those devices have been tampered. There's a whole bunch of really great things you can set policy on with the Duo Access Edition. The second thing that I want to mention is secure single sign-on. And so we touched on this very briefly with Duo Beyond. If you're using Duo Beyond, the secure single sign-on is enhanced with the ability to control access to internal applications. But secure single sign-on is a really great way for you to protect your cloud applications that your end users are starting to use. And if you've used single sign-on before, the difference with Duo's secure single sign-on, there are two things that I'd call out. First is as your users are interacting with the secure single sign-on, we're getting insight into the devices that they're using. So you can guarantee that those devices are at a certain security hygiene before they gain access to those different applications. The other great thing about this is that you can set different policies based on the risk of those applications. So you may have a very different risk profile for Salesforce versus Amazon Web Services. Now, if I am an end user who has access to both of those things, I might be able to get into Salesforce and Google Drive with a single policy, and I get that single sign-on experience where I click on one and I just get right into it after I've been in the other. But say I decided, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to log into Amazon Web Services. Well, if the administrator has set a policy that requires a higher level of security, I may actually step through that again, depending on what the administrator has done. And so the user will get bumped up to the next level, of course, if they have access to this. And the best part about this is for your end users, it's a very seamless experience. You as an administrator can configure this however you want, and then it only will bump up depending on what they're actually doing in their daily workflow so that they can get their work done as quickly as possible. And you can have the peace of mind that the policy on the back end is managing the right level of access for the right level of user. Now, if you've been using Duo Access for a while, the newest thing that we added to it is phishing. So the most common way that people get breached in organizations is by credential theft. 95% of breach comes from end user credentials being stolen. And on average, it's between 300 to 400 days before a breach can be discovered. And so a really great way for you to gain insight into how your end users are behaving is through phishing. You can run phishing campaigns now with the Duo Access Edition. And you can see on the screen here, these are some campaigns in pending approval, and these are active campaigns. What I'm going to do is step through the process of creating a phishing campaign with this tool, because traditionally, getting up and running with a phishing campaign is a long process. And so what we've done is essentially bring the same idea behind all of the things that we do at Duo, where how can we make this easy for both admins and end users, and how can we get things done quickly? So it'll walk you through a different set of steps that you need to get up and running, and I'm just going to walk through them directly. So in this case, I'm going to choose to phish a particular group in our organization, and I'm going to choose our labs team, because the labs team, they're a bunch of security hackers, so it'd be pretty fun to actually hack them back. And I'm going to choose a domain for this. I'm going to use the duo.com domain since that's our organization. I'm going to click next. And then I've got a whole bunch of users in here. By default, you'll see that they're all selected to make it really easy for me to get up and running. And all of these users are actually active in the Duo group. So I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm going to click next. I've got all my users. All right, so I've selected my target. Now I'm actually going to build the campaign itself. So this will then walk us through what does the phish actually look like for the end user. And so you can see I'm going to just bump up the size on this a little bit here so it's easier to see. So we can pick an application, and you'll notice that some of the most common applications in use are reflected over here. And our organization, we use something that looks like these docs right here. And in this case, let's see here. We work very closely in product with the labs team on roadmaps and the like, so I'm going to create a document that's all about like the 2017 roadmap. So I'm going to say 2017 road.
Jim, while you're filling this out, we did launch a very similar tool earlier, a few months ago, that is a free phishing tool.
Oh, right, yeah. So if you want to try this out and you're not using Access Edition, check out insight.duo.com, and you'll get this same experience, but it's only limited to 100 users. So, but it's very, very similar here. So I've got, for my labs coworkers, I've got a joint roadmap because I want them to feel like we're working together on this. And I'm going to say, hey, everyone.
And the other benefit with Access Edition, as Jim noted, with the free Insight tool, you can phish up to 100 users. It's completely free, insight.duo.com. With the tool that's attached to Access Edition, there's an unlimited cap. You can fish as many users in your organization as you want, schedule campaigns, that sort of thing.
Right, and then of course it leverages the existing groups you have, much like you saw when I chose the labs team. Well, we've imported that from our identity provider, and so it makes it really easy to get up and running with targeting particular groups. So you can see here, I'm really trying to get them to click on this thing. I mean, I would click on this. I think it's pretty cool. All right, I'm going to edit the sender, and it's going to come from me, Jim Simpson, and I'm Jim at cloudsignon.com portal. I'm going to use, so this right here, like these are phishing domains. I'm just going to use cloudsignon.com because it sounds benign and maybe somebody won't mouse over and think too weirdly of it. So my landing page. So this landing page is the page that you can see over here. There's a preview of it. Like if the end user ends up getting phished, this is what they will see once that happens. And so you have the opportunity to actually customize that landing page so you can give them instructions on what they should be doing differently or who they should be talking to. You can include a link, the text for the link itself, and then you can also write a custom message here. I'm just going to choose the default here, and I'm going to go ahead and choose the administrator. So in order to prevent random people from running phishing campaigns, you do have to have a way in which the phishing campaign gets approved. And so we've got a whole bunch of different aliases up here that ideally your organization has. And so, abuse@duo.com, phishing@duo.com, these would all map to something that you have in your network. And that way you would get an email, click on that email and say, I approve this campaign, and then the campaign would actually run. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose a Duo version. I'm going to go ahead and do a review and launch. Okay, and so this will say, okay, send, and if I wanted to, I could actually just send a test fish to whatever account is logged into the administrator console right now. And so in this case, since Trevor's logged in, this is up here. But this gives you an overview of all the different things we're going to do. And then this is what it's going to look like for the end users. I'm going to go ahead and say launch campaign. So ta-da, we've launched the campaign. And it's going to take me back to the administrative panel main screen in order to actually manage this. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually start looking through I'd go check my email and get this up and running. But what I'm going to do is sort of skip that and just jump into a phishing campaign I ran earlier. And you can see, well, we had sent it to 24 different people. How many people opened the email, how many clicked the email, how many entered credentials, and how many devices were out of date. So this is the general overview of what you get when the end user started to interact with your particular phishing campaign. And the really cool thing about this is, much like as end users are interacting with anything that Duo protects or manages, we're going to be taking a look at their devices to see what the overall security hygiene of those devices are. So you can actually correlate security hygiene to end user behavior. In the cases where you might see security hygiene that's really low, it's pretty important that those end users are not clicking on things. And so you can start to getting a mapping of what's going on there. The other thing I want to share with you is, even though, this is very exciting, 0 out of 24 entered their credentials.
There might be a different campaign that we could check out for what it's worth.
Okay, well, let me take a look here.
If we scroll down just a little bit, maybe not. So go down a little bit further, Jim, in the active campaigns.
Oh, right.
Yeah, there we go. So let's hit the human resources phishing drill, because I know that human resources are, they're very likely to help us.
This is much better. So you can see 15 out of 53 of these people opened up the email, 14 out of 3 clicked it, and this is the really important thing. 9 out of 53 entered their credentials. On average, we at Duo see, not in our company, but just across all organizations, 13% of end users are entering their credentials. And so if within your organization you're higher than that, there might be an opportunity to do some education. And if you're lower than that, then you're in pretty good shape compared to what we see in general out there. And of course, we give you a breakdown of how many devices are out of date across browsers, operating systems, the plugins that are associated with them. You can also see how the users are actually interacting with this, so you can see which user, what they did, if there are any security warnings associated with them. You can also download this information as a CSV or a JSON file to take action on it, or you can get a URL to share this with a colleague who might want to do some follow-up. And then of course, if you want to see what the phishing campaign looked like that you launched, this will give you a preview of that, so you can actually see, well, was there something about that particular fish that was more effective or less effective when you're doing the analysis after the fact to figure out, well, what do we need to do to help our end users understand how to behave in these particular situations.
Yeah, the other thing, if I may really quickly, that we noted is that a lot of times companies have difficulty getting approval to do a phishing campaign because it's perceived as being intrusive, or who wants to actually have the ability to launch a phishing campaign. Steve Edwards, one of our internal security folks, actually did a YouTube video about how to get approval to launch a phishing campaign, and that's on our Duo Security YouTube channel if you have any interest in checking that out and learning how to gain approval to actually launch an internal phishing campaign.
Okay, so Duo Access is all about device insight, secure single sign-on, and phishing, and the policies that you can put in place to automate a lot of this. So let's talk a little bit about new stuff in Duo MFA. So like I mentioned before, we have 3 editions: Beyond, Access, and MFA. MFA is the world's best and easiest to use multi-factor authentication, and most recently we added some new functionality to it. And if you haven't logged in, check it out on your admin panel. There's now some device insight within Duo MFA itself. So I'm going to just move over to the tab that shows that here. So this is a Duo MFA edition right now, and you'll see a new tab up here at the top called Device Insight. And what it does is it gives you that same stuff that we just went over in Duo Beyond and Duo Access, where you can gain insight into, how many devices do you have on the network, which ones are out of date, which ones are up to date, the different operating systems, browsers, and what have you. The one difference here, though, is that setting policy on those things is only available in Duo Access. And so if you're learning that you have devices that you want to take care of on your network based on the security hygiene that you see of them through Duo MFA, it's very easy for you to actually click and learn more about Duo Access and how to go about upgrading to it. And so the same great stuff that you've seen in Duo Access and Duo Beyond now is actually in Duo MFA. And if you want to, it's very, very simple for you to go and actually upgrade to those editions. Let's see here. Let's just move on to this. So if you're in any of our editions, it's always easy to try a new edition out for free. You just go to the pricing page, click upgrade. You can try it out for 30 days, get a hold of us, let us know what you think about it. And of course, if you have any questions about it, we're here to answer those both live, and also our team at Duo is standing by to answer any questions you might have after the fact as well. And finally, I wanted to mention our blog. If you haven't subscribed to it, duo.com/blog. We go over trends that we see in the security industry, breaches, different things that we're seeing in the markets out there, healthcare, IT, and then we also talk about the product as well. And so I would highly encourage you to check it out, and if there are things that you like, leave us comments, leave us some feedback. We're always looking forward to hearing more from our customers. And I think with that, that's everything that we've got today. We really appreciate you joining us. Vielen Dank, merci beaucoup, and thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.